For this video, I'm going to be breaking down what I think is the best JRPG to come out on each game console. I haven't played every single JRPG there is, but I've played most of the big ones, so I think I'm probably making a good choice, but it's not going to be perfect because I honestly haven't played every single JRPG. If you have any disagreements with my pick, you could leave it down in the comments below. I'm going to start this list with the NES because that's a console where I feel like the first true JRPGs came out on. There were some Japanese RPGs that came out for computer systems at the time, but are kind of different from what we know as a typical JRPG. And for the NES, I'm going to go with Dragon Quest III. On the NES, we would see the start of many of the great JRPG franchises, many of them still continuing on to this day. We had Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, Mother, Fire Emblem, and a number of other ones that started on the NES. But for my pick of the best, I'm going to go with Dragon Quest III. I think it was the best of the 4 Dragon Quest games that were on the NES. I feel like Dragon Quest III kind of perfected the formula that the first 2 games set up. It added gameplay mechanics that gave the game more depth. It's what I felt like at the time was the perfect Dragon Quest game. They would end up perfecting it even further and getting even better with Dragon Quest V. But for the NES, I think Dragon Quest III was the best, and I'll give it the edge over all the other great JRPGs that were on the system. And next we have the Sega Master System, and this one was pretty easy for me. I'm gonna go with Phantasy Star. Phantasy Star was really groundbreaking at the time. It had a really exciting adventure and really appealing graphics with the first-person dungeon crawling. It's pretty dated if you look at it by today's standards, but at the time it came out, it was really incredible. It was pretty much the one RPG on the Sega that can stand up to the ones on the NES, and even managed to surpass some of the ones on the NES. And that leads into the Sega Genesis, which for that one I will pick Phantasy Star 4. Phantasy Star 4 took a similar approach to the original in a similar setting with the sci-fi fantasy combo that's really appealing, and it's often said to be Sega's answer to Final Fantasy VI. And I would say that Phantasy Star 4 was able to reach similar heights to the great RPGs that Square Enix was putting out on the Super Nintendo around the same time. I wouldn't quite put it on the level of Final Fantasy VI, but that's not to say it's not really great. It's definitely one of the greatest turn-based JRPGs of all time, and if you've never tried this series, definitely try at least Phantasy Star 4. An honorable mention goes to Shining Force on the Sega Genesis, which was a really good alternative to Fire Emblem on the Nintendo systems. It's a really great strategy RPG. It's a little bit easier than Fire Emblem, so maybe a little bit easier to get into, especially since it lacks permadeath. I would definitely recommend giving that one a try as well if you haven't. So moving on, we're going to go to the PC Engine, or as it's known in North America, the TurboGrafx 16. This is probably the system where my experience is the least complete. There's a lot of JRPGs that look really great that came out on the PC Engine that have never been released in America and have never been translated even as fan translations into English, and I haven't had a chance to play them. But of the ones I played, I'm going to go with Ys Books 1 and 2. It's really one of the best action RPG series, even to this day, with Ys 8 and 9 that came out pretty recently, and it got its start back on the PC Engine and TurboGrafx. Once again, a little bit dated, but it's a really solid game. If there's any good JRPGs on the PC Engine that you've played that you think are better than Ys Books 1 and 2, you can leave it down in the comments and let me know, and maybe I'll give it a play through. For Game Boy, I'm going to pick Pokemon Red, Blue, and Green. Everybody knows about these games, whether you're a fan of JRPGs or not. These games were the start of one of the biggest video game franchises of all time. These games are really incredible when they came out. They really hooked me in and are probably some of the games where I had the longest play times, just spending a lot of time just catching Pokemon and stuff when I was a kid. They're my pick, and they'll be a pick on several other Game Boy systems just because they had such a great sense of adventure. One of the things that I feel like are most appealing about JRPGs is the sense of adventure and the excitement of setting out on a new journey. And I feel like Pokemon, more than any other game, captured that feeling for me. So that's why it's my pick for Game Boy. And next we're moving on to the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo is probably the hardest system for me to pick a single RPG from. It has some of my favorite of all time. Super Nintendo and PlayStation 1 are both really hard to pick a JRPG from. The Super Nintendo had Final Fantasy 4 through 6, Seiken Densetsu 2 and 3, Earthbound, Super Mario RPG, and a number of other classic RPGs. Most of the top RPGs on the SNES are some of my absolute favorite of all time, and are even better than a lot of the ones that I picked as the best game from other systems. But I had to be limited to one, and I'm gonna go with Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is pretty much the game that I feel like is the perfect turn-based RPG. It was the first turn-based RPG that I played that didn't have random encounters. Just the scope of the story and the gameplay was better than anything that I've ever played in an RPG before that. It had a really well-written story that was a rare case of a time travel story done right. The game looked great, the music was great. It's no surprise to me that it's considered one of the greatest games of all time by a lot of people. Next up, I'll do the Sega CD. I don't know if that really counts as a system because it's kind of like an add-on, but I'll still do it. Sega CD isn't really known for its JRPGs, but it did have one of the best JRPGs of all time on there, which was Lunar. There were 2 Lunar games released, Lunar the Eternal Blue and Lunar the Silver Star. If I had to pick one, I'd probably go with the Silver Star, but I would say definitely play both of them. Lunar is definitely one of the all-time great classic RPGs. The Sega CD was known for its full motion video and improved graphics. And in Lunar, you had these really incredible cutscenes that were fully animated, anime style cutscenes that were like nothing you'd ever seen on any game before that. Probably nothing too special looking at it now, but at the time it was really incredible. And the game's really solid. It's got one of the best stories of any RPG that I played. So that's my pick for Sega CD. Moving on, now we have the Sega Saturn. The Saturn is probably the most underrated game console in my opinion. When it came out, I didn't really know there was any great games on there, but now looking back, there was a lot of absolute classics. You had Shining Force 3, which is really great. You had Lunar Silver Star Story. Grandia was released on the Saturn. You had Langrisser. And then my pick for the best is Panzer Dragoon Saga. It had a really unique battle system that was really just a breath of fresh air. The game is extremely fun to play. It takes some rail shooter aspects from the earlier Panzer Dragoon games and incorporates that with JRPG style battles. It's definitely one of the most unique and interesting JRPGs I've come across. Unfortunately, physical copies of the game are extremely rare and go for very high prices, so most likely you're going to have to resort to playing it on an emulator like I did as well. Now we have the PlayStation, which is the hardest system for me to pick a single game for. PlayStation's got so many absolute classic JRPGs. Of course, Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9, Parasite Eve, which was one of my favorite of all time, which combined survival horror and JRPG elements and was very nearly my pick. You had Dragon Quest Legend of Dragoon, Chrono Cross, Grandia, Final Fantasy Tactics. Almost too many to even list right here. I thought about it for a long time, and in the end I ended up deciding on Suikoden 2. It was a really hard choice, especially to pick it over classics like Final Fantasy 7 and Dragon Quest 8. I realize if there's going to be a pick that's controversial on my list, it's probably going to be this one, but the Suikoden series is just my favorite JRPG series, so I'm pretty biased. So if you disagree with this pick, I totally understand, but it's going to be my pick for the PlayStation. The first one was really great, but the second one improved it even further. Suikoden 2 probably had one of the best stories of any JRPG I'd ever played. It has a more mature, serious story and a huge cast of memorable characters. The gameplay is just so fun and smooth. In my opinion, it's got to be the best turn-based JRPG out there. It was a hard choice between this one and several others, but that's going to be my pick for PlayStation 1. Alright, and now for Nintendo 64, it's gonna be Quest 64. Just kidding, no it's not. It's going to be Ogre Battle, Person of Lordly Caliber. I had a hard choice picking between this one and Paper Mario. Those are pretty much the only 2 notable JRPGs on the N64, but I gave the edge to Ogre Battle. This is one of the best strategy RPGs out there, and every game in the series is great. Unfortunately, for some reason, this one is kind of forgotten. But this one's also got a really great story and characters, and every game in the series has really fun gameplay. It's a shame that this series is so overshadowed by like Fire Emblem, because the games in this series are just as good in my opinion. And for the Game Boy Color, I'm gonna pick Pokemon Gold and Silver. It's the same thing as with Pokemon Red and Blue, with the fun sense of adventure and the fun in catching and collecting Pokemon. Gold and Silver fixed a lot of the problems that were kind of weird quirks with the original Red and Blue, and expanded the game, made it even better, added day-night cycle, and just overall improved the games in almost every way. I really enjoyed the games and put a ton of hours into them as a kid, so that's going to be my pick for Game Boy Color. And then for Sega Dreamcast, I'm going to go with Skies of Arcadia. This game was just so much fun. This game has some of the most fun exploration and one of the best senses of adventure of any JRPG. It's going to be my pick for the best JRPG on the Sega Dreamcast, although there is probably a superior version of this game on the Nintendo GameCube with a reduced random encounter rate and improved quality of life adjustments. Flying around in airships and exploring the world in this game is probably one of the most fun things I've done in any JRPG, so this one's a must play if you haven't played it. For PlayStation 2, this was another really difficult choice. You have Final Fantasy X, which is a classic, Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, Grandia 3, just a ton of really great RPGs on the PlayStation 2 as well. Of course, I'm very tempted to go with Suikoden 3 for the PS2, as all the reasons that I praised Suikoden 2 for are all true about Suikoden 3, and the game is probably just as good as Suikoden 2, if not even better. But I feel like I might be a little bit biased, so it's kind of my pick, but I'll also go with Persona 4. I just really love the Persona games. The combat's really fun, and so is collecting Personas. It's not as difficult as the Shin Megami Tensei games, so it's a little bit easier to get into. I really do enjoy the school segments where you go and you hang out with your friends and increase your relationship with them. I think it really improves the story and makes you care for the characters more. Everything about this game is really incredible, from the music to the presentation to the characters and the story. It's definitely one of my favorite games that I've ever played. For the Game Boy Advance, I was tempted to go with Pokemon again with Pokemon Emerald, because I think that's a really great Pokemon game, but in the end I'm going to go with Mother 3. It didn't actually get a release in the United States on Game Boy Advance, but I ended up playing a fan translation on emulator. I love the setting and the characters. The games in the Mother series have a really unique feel to them and a unique sense of humor that's not really like anything else. It had really fun, smooth gameplay. I like the rolling counters on the health bars, which gives a little bit of a unique twist to the typical turn-based battle style. This game has one of the most unique stories, and it has a lot of really emotional moments, and is really a game that I think most people should give a try and see if they like it. I also have an honorable mention for Fire Emblem, The Blazing Blade, and Sacred Stones. Those are some of my favorite Fire Emblem games. They have some of the best characters, maps, and gameplay in the entire series, so they were close to being picked also. For the Xbox, I'm going to go with Phantasy Star Online. Xbox wasn't known for JRPGs and really didn't have many that were released on there, but the Xbox did have online connectivity that was unmatched by any other system at the time, which made Phantasy Star Online a really special experience. For the Nintendo GameCube, I'm going to go with Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. It's arguably the best game and one of the best and most consistent franchises in JRPGs. It probably has the best story of any of the Fire Emblem games in my opinion. It's got kind of the typical Fire Emblem gameplay, which is always fun. One of the best Fire Emblem games. This is another one that's almost impossible to get a hold of a physical copy nowadays, where copies sell online for hundreds of dollars. If you're a fan of any of the Fire Emblem games, I would recommend at least getting a hold of an emulator so you can experience this game for yourself. The Skies of Arcadia release on the GameCube is really good as well. Like I said, it's probably superior to the Dreamcast version. And Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, if that counts as a JRPG, was also pretty close up there. But by a hair, I'm going to pick Fire Emblem Path of Radiance for the GameCube. And then for the Nintendo DS, I'm going to go with Pokemon Platinum. Most of the best JRPGs on the Nintendo DS were Pokemon games, and Platinum's probably my favorite one of the bunch. I do love the Sinnoh region, which I know some people didn't like as much, but it's actually one of my favorite regions, and I think Platinum has just some of the best post-game and extra content compared to some of the other Pokemon games on the Nintendo DS. For the PSP, I'm going to go with Tactics Ogre Let Us Cling Together. This is a remake of the Super Nintendo game, which was an incredible game in its own right, but the PSP version just pretty much perfects it and updates it for a more modern audience. It's one of the best tactical RPGs out there, so I definitely recommend this one. It may be hard to say because there's so many good tactical RPGs, but it's possible that this game has my favorite battle system in any tactical RPG. And then for the Xbox 360, I have Lost Odyssey. There weren't a ton of JRPGs on the Xbox 360, and a lot of people didn't play this one because it was on the Xbox. It's a shame it's not really that well known. Hopefully it gets like a remaster and a release on the modern generation of consoles, and maybe more people will play it. This game's got a really good story and smooth, fun gameplay that's on level of games like Final Fantasy. So if you have a chance, give this one a try. For the PlayStation 3, I'm going to go with Persona 5. Persona 5 pretty much just took everything I already loved about the Persona series and took it to another level. Everything about the game is extremely stylish. The music and even the menus and everything looks so great. The gameplay and battles are really fun, and once again really enjoyed the school segments where you go around and hang out with your friends and do various activities. It kind of breaks up the gameplay between the dungeon sections and makes the game more fun. The way the game makes you plan out your days and lets you choose how to spend your time really draws you into the game and makes you feel like you're living the game. I really got into this game when it came out, and it really restored my love for JRPGs at a time when I was kind of getting tired of them. So it's going to be my pick for the PS3. And for the Nintendo Wii, I'm going to be going with Xenoblade Chronicles. This game was like mind-blowing when it came out. I don't think at that time I've ever seen a game with such a large explorable world. The game looked incredible, and the battles mechanics are really addicting. All the environments are gorgeous to look at, and it's one of the most cinematic RPGs ever made. For the PS Vita, I'm going to pick Ys Memories of Celceta. Once again, the Ys games are always quietly actually really excellent. The gameplay in this one is just really fun and really satisfying. This one's an action RPG with real-time combat, so if you prefer that type of battle style over turn-based, this may be a really good choice for you to play. In my opinion, this is the best action RPG on any handheld console. For the Nintendo 3DS, I'm going to go with Shin Megami Tensei 4 Apocalypse. This may be my favorite game in the Shin Megami Tensei series. As always, it's got that more dark, serious story that's a nice change of pace compared to a lot of other JRPGs. The game has a good challenge to it and has the quality that you would expect from the Shin Megami Tensei series, but even takes it to a further level, making the gameplay even more satisfying and addicting. And this game visually is probably one of the best handheld games that I've ever seen. And then for the Nintendo Switch, I'm going to go with Dragon Quest XI S. Dragon Quest XI was pretty much the perfect modern Dragon Quest game. It's got a great world map and great locations. If you're looking for something groundbreaking, you may be disappointed by Dragon Quest XI, but if you're a fan of Dragon Quest XI is just about anything you could have hoped for. It's pretty much a perfection of the Dragon Quest formula. For Xbox One, PS4, PS5, it's a little bit less interesting. Pretty much all the great JRPGs that are on those systems have been released on usually multiple systems. For example, you could play Dragon Quest XI on the Switch, PS4, or the Xbox One. So for Xbox One, I'll also go with Dragon Quest XI for the same reasons that I had for the Switch. And then for PS4, I'm going to go with Persona 5 Royal. I already explained what I liked about Persona 5, and with Royal, you have an expanded edition of what's already one of the best games ever. I'll skip picking a game for the PS5 for now since it hasn't been out for very long. I hardly went into any detail on these games, and the video already got much longer than I expected, so hopefully it was enjoyable. So that's going to be my list. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. If you agree or disagree, let me know down in the comments. And until next time, bye.